Hello and welcome to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Richard, and we are pleased to have Matthew Sellers with us from MCT Homes Painting and Remodeling LLC out of Springfield, Missouri. Welcome to the program, Matthew. How are you doing?
It's a little warm outside, but I'm doing okay. How are
Okay,
you?
yes. We've gone from some very wet weather here in the Springfield area to now it's hot and humid. So it's a whole
Very.
change of it's just welcome to the Ozarks, Missouri, right? That's the way it goes. Well, give us a little background about you, Matthew. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and give us a little insight on how you just developed this company and how you got into this business.
Well, I mean, there's kind of it's not really an interesting or amazing story by any stretch of imagination. I was 17 or so years old, and I had a friend who was painting with his dad. His dad was a master painter, and back at that time, shortly after the recession, a lot of painters kind of disappeared. He wasn't one of them. And at the time, I was young, dumb, and stupid, and I didn't really have a whole lot going on for me in life. I didn't have a job, and my buddy's dad let me stay on his couch, and he said, "Okay, you work for me now." That. I've been doing it ever since. Mind you, I didn't get paid very much back then, and my beginning roots of being a painter was very dramatic, to say the least. But I've been doing it kind of off and on ever since. I built my company it will be 5 years ago. Legally, we started I say 5 years ago. That's when I went out on my own. But I actually opened up the business 4 years ago when we finally had enough money to actually make that happen. And it was kind of at the height of COVID. That was, I kind of jokingly say it was the biggest mistake of my life to start a business during COVID, especially one where I have to be in people's houses, and they didn't want me in their houses. So, but I started out as doing apartments and small houses and rentals and whatnot, and we've done everything from, the real small basic projects, interiors for rentals to multi-million-dollar houses at this point. In Highland Springs and Buffalo and Aurora. We've done a couple of them in Aurora recently. I mean, we just kind of been branching out and going as far as commercial painting as well. We painted the Will Hoyt Plaza building downtown in Springfield. That one was actually that's the job that actually allowed us to become legal. Allowed us to get all of our insurance in order, and I mean, it paid a lot of money. So. It pretty much put us on the map, and I've been very grateful and thankful for it ever since. So
That's fantastic. Now, are you born and raised in Springfield area, or how did you get to Missouri if you didn't?
I was unfortunately born to a very unhappy set of circumstances, and due to that, I started my life in the St. Louis area, and due to my childhood being a very traumatic one, I'm not going to go into too many details. It's not really necessary. But my behavior led me to actually, ironically enough, the Good Samaritan Boys Ranch in in Brighton, Missouri. It was a long road from there to where I am now. So I came from St. Louis, but I wasn't really able to make my home there. When I came down here to the Boys Ranch when I was 15 years old, I aged out of the state system and all of that, and I've been in Springfield pretty much ever since. We moved around a couple times, went to Arkansas, came back. I was in the Army for a little while and stationed in Oklahoma. I came back to Springfield. Springfield's a magnet. I come back here often. And so now this is kind of my base and home of operations, but we service and do Springfield, Branson, Republic, Willard, Nixa, Ozark, pretty much everybody in the entire circle.
Fantastic. So did it start out mostly as painting, you said, and then when
That's
did
where
the
it started.
construction
Yeah.
side come into it?
I don't really know how that part started. I had a belief. I had a couple of friends that I'd worked with on different job sites, and they said, you know, the best way that you can, you know, kind of further your career is by working in rentals and not just doing the painting, but doing what they call the make-readies and the turns. Because doing those, they said, well, you'll learn a whole vast set of skills. You know, the handyman trade, for all intents and purposes, there's still a lot of handyman companies out there, but it's kind of been a dying breed since the 90s. You don't really have the handyman that just shows up and fixes your plumbing, and like they did in the 80s and the 70s. But I wanted to kind of know those other trades, and so they said, well, do these on rentals, work for a rental company, you'll learn all of them really quickly. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I discovered, yeah, now all of a sudden I know how to do the plumbing in an apartment. I know how to do the flooring. I started learning kind of tips and tricks about doing the flooring. And then I kind of picked up on one, I picked up on another, and then kind of slowly from there, I kind of started adding it into my kind of getting perfected at it, as it were. And so for whatever reason, I started in rentals, and that just kind of steamrolled, become a snowball going down a hill. Before I knew it, I had all these skills, and I wasn't really sure what to do with all the rest of them, because, I mean, primarily our focus is painting, sure, but if I can make some money doing the rest of it, I'm gonna. And so I just kind of was like, you know what, let's go ahead and do this. Let's throw everything into one basket, and it can be a challenge sometimes, because I'm still learning something new on every job site every time. There's always something that comes up. But the construction side of things, I don't know that I would even have a company if I didn't offer those sort of things. I'm glad that I did learn those at a young age, but I don't really know how it actually happened. I was just like, well, I know how to do it, so let's do it.
Absolutely. And so it seems like in the painting world that how you prep is probably the most important aspect
Absolutely.
of painting, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I can see where a lot of times you would be either putting some new trim in or obviously recaulking, all that just to get ready, right? Along with taping and
Prep is,
blocking
prep is
off
definitely the number one key factor in my line of work. It doesn't matter whether we're painting or if we're doing anything on the construction or the remodel side. The prep is number one focus. Yes, you can have really clean lines, you can have your trim put in all nice and pretty, but if you have not started with the proper prep on any job, everything you do from that point on will fail, and you will be at the scrutiny of a Facebook thread post somewhere saying, oh, look at this shoddy work. And if you don't do your prep work, it can ruin a business for sure.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more detail about, prep and what good practices are and what maybe some not so good practices are that you've seen out there?
To give you the good practices, I definitely would probably start with the bad ones. And I say Facebook because I see this often. I of course have a Facebook business page, and on my Facebook business page, it is flooded with, for every one painter, there's 1,000 other ones that think they're just like you. But a lot of the time, the biggest thing that I see is that these painters and these contractors and whatnot, they're saying, oh, well, I just come in and I don't use any tape. Okay. I've been doing this for 20 years or so now. Tape isn't necessarily something that I use on every single surface because, again, I've been doing it for 20 years. I can pull a nice straight line when I'm cutting in certain areas. I know how to cut in, if I'm doing two corners of a wall, and they butt up to that corner, I know how to get that line nice and straight. I'm not going to tape off and whatnot. But when you're doing things like cutting in the walls into trim, specifically the one that I see often on my job sites is people that have stain trim. If you don't mask that, it's going to be a problem. You're going to get paint on that trim. And some people, when they're doing it on their own home, they may not necessarily care, because I see that often. Oh, well, it's my house. Nobody else is going to see it but me, yada, yada, yada. But whenever I come into your house, you're paying me for perfection. If you have painters coming in, and the first thing they say is, well, I can cut a straight line without using any tape. that's a huge red flag. You may not necessarily put tape on every surface, but if it's something that's not supposed to have paint on it, you better put tape on it. And then at the same time, a lot of people think they can just put the tape down and then it's fine. But they don't think about the second part of that, which is what we call blading it off. We use generally a putty knife, a nice flimsy or a flexible putty knife, and after we put the tape on the trim or on the surface, we then follow up and we put pressure on that tape all the way down the line, wherever that tape is, so that it makes a proper seating. If you don't do that, more oftentimes than not, especially where the caulk and the trim and the wall kind of all conjunct together and meet, the paint will come down the wall, or the paint will come up the trim, or vice versa, and it will bleed under that tape if you've not done that actual blading off process. It sounds super simple, but it's something that gets missed probably more times than I can possibly count on the job sites that I've had to come in and fix other painters' mistakes. And so when I say that right there, it's 10, 15 extra minutes per whatever it may only be 10, 15, I should say it this way. It may only be 10 or 15 extra minutes of work, but that 10 or 15 extra minutes worth of prep time and blading it off properly can save you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many hours on cleanup later, or having to come back through and refix everything because you screwed up doing the prep. And the same thing, that is probably the number one thing that I see. But at the same time, another one that is really, really crucial, there is a lie in the painting industry that says, and it gets clients, homeowners all the time, they're going to paint their house, and they go into the paint store and say, well, I'd really like to have my walls, whatever color. We could say it's pink, we could say it's green, we could say it's blue, red, white, whatever. And the paint stores, and they'll say, oh, well, this is a paint and primer combination. You don't need primer because this already has it built into the paint. That is true, yes, but it's also a very big lie. And a lot of that is because the surfaces that they're testing on are not your house. The surfaces that they're testing on are going to be their generic surfaces in shops, in buildings, barns. They're going to be doing those in a very specific, atmosphere. It's not going to be for every atmosphere. It's not going to be for every wall. They don't know who did the drywall in your house. They don't know if they were ever primed to begin with. And so the primer combination paints, while they all have a variation of it in there, does not mean that it's going to cover, or it's not going to flash, or it's not going to do this or that or the other, or that it's going to fail or peel. The biggest mistake that I see is that homeowners will buy this paint, and they'll buy the most expensive paint because they're told this is what they need. But in reality, they come to me and I can use a paint that is 3 times cheaper than what they purchase from the box stores, from Lowe's, Home Depot, Sherwin-Williams, Spectrum. They're all kind of guilty of it because it's a sales game, and it's nothing against them in any way, shape, or form. Every paint company has their own good products and bad products. There's things that I'll use from Lowe's that while not often, I may actually pass over Sherwin-Williams or Spectrum because Lowe's has something that's better, in my own personal opinion. But the homeowners will think that they can just do it all in one coat, and it's done. And then I come into their house and they painted it 10 years ago. Well, I painted it myself. That's great. I'm so glad that you did. I'm glad that you called me, though, because I can see through everything that you put on your walls, and that's why you're actually calling me. The prep on that is really quite simple. Putting an extra layer of primer on your walls before you're doing dynamic colors like blues, greens, reds, purples, anything white. If you're going to paint your walls white, prime them first. It doesn't have to be any specific color or any specific fancy primer. Just a basic flat white paint is all you need. But a lot of homeowners and a lot of painters, they're just looking at the dollar sign. They're not looking at, the longevity of the project. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up for the most part. It's kind of a little long-winded, I apologize. But that priming and that taping, blading it off, those are two things that get missed so often and keep me in business. Thank you, but also, I hope people at least take a little bit of, experience and use that in their future projects, even if it's not from me.
That's good. And so I do some DIY painting around the house. I've got cats and they scratch the walls and stuff like that. And so I'm constantly touching things up. So in the case, let me ask you a couple different cases here. So if it's like that, it's the same color, this happens to be Behr paint in this case. So it's the same Behr paint. I got 1 gallon and I just, the cat scratches the wall. I hit it with a little bit of over paint to make it look good again. In that case, you're not talking about having to do that, or if it goes down to the drywall, would you say you need to prime that again?
So in circumstances like that, it's kind of a catch-22. Again, it comes down to the product that you're using. In this case, you're using Behr paint. If it's the exact same paint that you were using before, it kind of can go one of two ways. Now, in a situation like this where a cat's been scratching and they're kind of digging into that wall a little bit, I would do what's called a spot prime. I would do a spot prime. Usually an aerosol can is sufficient. Something that I use a lot is from Sherwin-Williams called Pro Block. It's an oil-based. It's kind of like Kills in a spray can, but it's a Sherwin-Williams version of it. A little bit cheaper. But it works just the same. What that does is it seals the drywall itself, so that it can take the paint and not soak in and create what's called flashing. When a cat scratches the wall or the dog scratches a wall, usually I'll do a little. I'll prime them first with a little bit of that oil-based primer, and then I'll do either. Generally speaking, I like to use hot mud for scenarios like that because it smooths down better. It doesn't pit as bad. But you can use spackle or something like that as long as the dips and the chinks aren't too deep. But from there, depending on the type of paint you're using, that's kind of where the catch-22 comes into play. Some paints do it really well, some colors do it really well. You can just touch up a spot and you may never see it. If you're looking to not ever see that spot again though, in my line of work, I don't do what I call spot touch-ups. I do corner-to-corner touch-ups. That means as long as it's not in, like if it's down on a lower corner, way down here where nobody's ever gonna see it, I might just touch it with the brush and that might call it a day. But if, like, say, you've got damage in the middle of a wall, same kind of scenario where you had a nail hole or something like that, I'm not gonna touch the middle of the wall with the brush. I'm gonna actually cut and roll the entire wall, corner to corner. That way, whenever it's done, you don't actually see the new paint versus the old paint that's over here. It's gonna be one solid kind of color all the way across. Now, Behr paints, I don't have as much history with Behr paints specifically, because I just don't use them on my job sites. It's more cost effective in my opinion. But if it's something within the realm of a small corner area, yeah, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be a problem, and you probably never notice, especially if it's white. But if you're getting into darker colors, that's where that comes into play again. Anything in the greens and the blues, or even the reds, you're gonna see it every time unless you do that corner to corner.
Now, does it make a difference? In this case, we've got what I would term a knockdown finish, okay? And in a lot of places, it's kind of a rough knockdown finish. So in that case, if you've got a scratch, it shows up a little bit more than you might think, but it seems, and of course the sheen matters, right? So you got to make sure if
that was going to be my next, yeah, I was going to say that's where the sheen comes into play.
Yeah, I was going to say that, if it could be the same color and a different sheen, and that's going to show up like a sore thumb in the middle of the wall, right?
Right, for sure. So the texture definitely matters. I personally love when I come into a house that has some sort of orange peel or a knockdown on their walls, because it makes the repairs leagues easier. Now, mind you, I generally use hoppers or something like that in order to match the texture if we need to. But because it does have that texture, we can hide the blemishes a lot easier. But that, like I said, that sheen, that's where the sheen comes into play. If it's flat, and again, this does come down to product choice. If it's a flat wall, touch-ups are usually a lot easier in the center of a wall, as long as you can manage to blend it out and it hasn't aged too much, especially things like flat tans. I really hate doing touch-ups on flat tans, because as they age, then even though you're using out of the same pot, the old paint versus the new paint will come up as a different variation of brown. But like with whites, as long as it's not super shiny, like it's not a semi-gloss, it's not a satin, you can usually get away with a decent touch-up with a wall that's textured. But even still, like I said, just as a professional thing, I still recommend, unless it's in an innocuous spot where you're just not really going to have your eyes trained to it, I still recommend doing that corner to corner, just so that the sheen blends and it becomes the same sheen throughout. You don't happen to come around a corner and just happen to see that little spot in the wall and it kind of shows up like a flashlight in the middle of the wall because it's super shiny here, whereas down here it's a little lackluster. But as long as it's things like eggshells or one that I like is a velvet sheen. It's only done in one product that I'm aware of right now, by a Super Paint in Sherwin-Williams, but I have found that stuff specifically works really well for touch-ups, and it's somewhere kind of stuck between a velvet, velvet is kind of stuck somewhere between an eggshell and a satin. It's kind of like right there in the middle. It's not real high sheen, it's not real low sheen. It's just, it works really, really well for stuff like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to work with all paint. So that's why I say corner to corner. That way you can have all your bases covered and you don't have to worry about it later.
Very good. Very good. Now, what about, you mentioned if you're putting a primer coat down, so does it matter whether it's oil-based or latex, which would be water-based, I guess?
Yeah, water-based.
Matter in that regard? Yeah.
Almost, I'm going to say 20% at the most, at least for what I do, does that actually matter. If you have, let's say, water damage or, I see this one a lot in rentals, crayons, waxy constitutions on the walls, those little wax warmers that people plug into their plug-ins, they get the wax and it just drips down the wall. Yeah. Stuff like that, something that has some sort of waxy or oily constitution to it, if it's on your walls, absolutely, at bare minimum, spot prime those areas with an oil-based primer. Whether it's a roll-on blocking primer or Kills, Zinsser, Pro Block, all those will work just fine. But in most cases, priming with the paint that we use in properties now, homes, commercial properties, it's almost never oil-based anymore. So there's no real reason to have an oil-based primer. Even in new constructions where the walls are raw sheetrock, they haven't had anything on them yet except maybe the texture, those are still going to be just a water-based primer. Oil-based primer really isn't necessary unless you have something that, it's the age-old elementary school experiment. You put water and oil in a cup or something like that and you try to stir it around. What's it going to do? It's going to separate. So unless there's something on your walls that will separate from the water in the paint, there's really no necessary need to actually use an oil-based primer. Water spots on your ceilings, oil-based. Wax on your walls, oil-based. Everything else, yeah, I think my favorite thing to do is because it's so cheap, at least for me, because I get a good deal on it, but I pay, well, I'm actually not going to say what I pay, because then somebody else is going to hear this and they're going to go to Sherwin-Williams and scream and cry. But I use Property Solutions flat white paint. It's about the cheapest thing that Sherwin-Williams carries. And it makes a great primer. It also makes a great ceiling paint. And I pay so much lower than if I were to go buy the marketed. You go to the stores and they say, well, I'm looking for ceiling paint. And they have paint that's marketed as ceiling paint. It's just paint. It's exactly the same. There's not really any difference to it. It doesn't block or hide anything any better. So if I'm going to save my company a lot of money by buying the cheapest thing Sherwin-Williams has, and it does the exact same thing as their high dollar primers, go for it. And I mean, I save a lot of money a month by just using that. And it works just as well, so there's really no point.
So typically in a home, are we talking is there 5 different levels of sheen typically, other than velvet that you mentioned? Is it flat, eggshell, semi-gloss,
You've got a few. It does depend on brand. More common, we have what we call flat. We have matte, which is basically flat. And depending on brand, they may actually just call it matte. They may call it flat. They may call it matte flat. I mean, it's they've got different ones on that line. And then you kind of get into your low sheen eggshells and your eggshells. Because eggshell in itself is already kind of like a lower sheen in general, but then they have a low sheen eggshell where it's just a little bit less. It's just one step over from a flat. And then from there, you kind of get into your satins. Now, like I said, I only know of velvet being a specific to the super paint from Sherwin-Williams, but a lot of times, more often times than not, it jumps from eggshell to satin. And then from there, you get into your glosses, which is your semi-gloss, your high gloss, low gloss. Those are kind of specialty paints. I don't use a lot of those except on things like trim or doors. I know the real high gloss stuff is getting kind of popular on the West Coast. Not so much here, but I am hearing that it's kind of making its way over here. So I may end up doing some mirror finishes here in the future. Who knows? But primarily the main ones is just kind of your eggshells, your satins, your semi-glosses, and flats. So in general, it's 4. But depending on brand, they may jump around and add a couple in between.
Sure. And then trim is most, it seems like white trim is pretty much everywhere these days. And is that typically done in a semi-gloss, or what? Is there any typical to that?
More often times than not, I usually recommend a semi-gloss. It's significantly easier to keep clean. And it just looks better. But I mean, on occasion, I do have people that want it to be in a satin, so not quite as shiny. It's still really easy to keep clean for the most part, but it's not quite as pop off of the wall as a semi-gloss might be. So yeah, it's pretty common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the jobs that you're willing to take on. So, talk about, typical jobs for you. Do you do decks, stains? Do you do exterior, interior? Do you do commercial? Will you do a water tower? Will you do a exterior of a brick, or not brick necessarily, but maybe a cement building or something? Kind of talk to us about the range of services that you offer and that you've done.
So I'm going to tell you that my business partner, he's not with us on video. He doesn't like to be on camera. His name is Chris,
okay.
And I will tell you, if I took a water tower, he'd probably throw me off the water tower. He is definitely afraid of heights, so I don't think I'll be doing any of those. But we do a range of different things. Everything from residential to commercial. That's kind of what I always tell people. The kind of stipulation on jobs that we don't take is we don't do any HVAC. I don't want it. I don't want to go underneath your house. I have no interest in that. I don't do any major electrical,
okay.
And I don't do any major plumbing. There are licensed electricians and licensed plumbers for that sort of thing. And that's a whole different can of worms and insurance that I just have no interest in. So for all intents and purposes, pretty much everything else we handle. Now, there are kind of a couple of little things that we don't do. I don't do any installations of carpet. One, I can't stand carpet. Carpet is disgusting. I hate it. I don't even like having it in my own house. but it's here and I can't really get rid of it. So that being said, we do things like flooring installs. We're not offering hardwood floor installs right now just because I don't have the crew size to kind of add that into our pool, but as our crew grows, we may add that back in. But we do LVP, laminate flooring, tile, and things like that. We do kind of as far as projects that we currently are doing a lot of, is exteriors. This is exterior season. And so if it's your deck, if you have a cabin in the woods or on the lake and you need new stain, we do that. We do paint, stain, all different kinds of finishes, all different kinds of things. Now, I'm not going to do your roof because I'm not a roofer. But if you got gables, we're getting up on your roof and doing gables. We're not. I like to say the phrase, "I will be glad to take your wallet as long as you give it to me willingly." Meaning, we'll do just about anything because we have a very wide base. But there may be a few things here and there that we won't do. But we've done everything from, like I said, multi-million-dollar houses in Highland Springs and Branson and to we've done double wide trailers in the middle of nowhere. We did a 60-foot by 35-foot tall Quonset hut last week in Aurora. And it was built sometime in the 70s or whatever, and they had it painted by a previous painting company, and the paint just did not hold up, and we gave it a whole bold new look. You can look at that on my Facebook if you want. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter, whether it's a house or an apartment or like I said, the Will Hoyt Plaza building. It's 200,000 square feet of just brick and more brick and more brick, and we were up 40 feet in the air in a lift. To me, it's all pretty much the same, as much as I hate to say that, because like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. So they all kind of blend together, and it's kind of like if you talk to a tattoo artist will say, well, to me, it's just tracing. Because you do it so often, you do it time after time after time after time after time, you begin to become so proficient at it, you don't really see a difference between one job and another. So yeah, we'll take just about anything. Now there are some limitations. I do have a small crew, so we are trying to stay within something that we can get done within like a week to 2 weeks. With our small crew, because I don't want to have, let's say a $40,000 or $50,000 job or something like that. That's going to take me a month or so. They got bills, they got mouths to feed. I got mouths to feed, so I'm not looking to take on any massive, humongous projects. I try to keep all of ours to something that we can do within a couple of week time frame at the most. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not scheduling bigger jobs. I'll be glad to take some of those. As long as it's something that we can schedule out to either a slower portion of the season, specifically. I think the Will Hoyt building, when we did that one back in 2023, it took us 2.5 months to complete that one because they did not want us to spray it. They wanted it all brush and rolled, and so it was 8 to 10 hours a day of just nothing but going up and down on the lift and brushing and doing all the tuck pointing and fixing all the brick and priming areas, and it took 2.5 months. And by the end of it, I mean, the paycheck was fantastic, but I realized something then, that 2.5 months, it was a lot of ramen noodles and wondering if the bills were going to get paid. So trying to keep it a little smaller than that for right now, just at least until we can get enough room for some more guys.
Okay, so you talk a little bit about the difference in if you do a spray versus a brush and roll. What outcomes are different in that case?
Mostly it's the finish. A lot of times it's not really cost effective to spray a job. Now, if a house is a new construction, for instance, and we're doing trim, doors, walls, all that, I'm still going to brush and roll the walls, but I will spray all the trim, all the doors, all the windows, any what I'm going to call accent surface, anything that's designed to stand apart from the walls. Those I'm going to spray because when we spray, it actually creates a very clean, very smooth, very slick, very new surface. Whereas if we were to brush and roll, you might get brush marks or stipple from the rollers, depending on which rollers you're using, depending on what paint you're using. You can end up getting sags and runs, and if you're using enamels or lacquers and whatnot, there are certain paints that really do require needing to be sprayed rather than brush and rolled too. Things like enamels, generally, you don't want to really do brush and roll unless you have to. So, but if it's a repaint, or like if the homeowner had painted their house and they painted all their trim with a brush, well, at that point, there's not really an added benefit to me spraying the trim because you've already got brush marks all over it. The spraying isn't going to do me any extra services. I'm just going to be wasting a whole lot of paper and tape and prep work for spraying, whereas I could use half that amount of paper and tape and just rebrush it like they did before, and it wouldn't look any different, brush stroke wise, because it's already been brushed. Spraying wise, it really is, you kind of have to use your best judgment when you go into a job and say, is it going to be better or more lucrative time wise, material wise, cost wise? Is it going to be more lucrative for me to spray this, or is it going to be more lucrative for me to brush and roll it? Now, at the Wilhoit Plaza building, I would have sprayed that all day long. I cannot stand rolling brick. You get misses everywhere because the roller doesn't always get between those nooks and crannies in between each brick and every tuck point line. Spraying will allow you to get into those places that a roller can't. But it was the client's preference that we didn't do any spraying because they have a very large parking lot, and of course on either side of the building it was a breezeway, Jefferson and South Street. The last thing we wanted to do is be spraying it up top and get a mist down on somebody's car. So that makes sense. Even if we did create around the lift so that wouldn't happen, they still wanted to kind of alleviate their fears of having an insurance claim. It's really gonna come down to every job is gonna make the decision for you. You're gonna walk in and you're gonna look at it and you're gonna say, okay, this time I'm doing an entirely brand new repaint in this house. This trim has clearly been sprayed before. This crown has clearly been sprayed before. These walls are textured or these walls aren't textured, doesn't really necessarily matter. At that point, you're going to look at them and say, all right, it's been sprayed before, this house is empty, I don't have to bag off any furniture, I'm going to go ahead and mask the floors and mask everything off and spray it and give it a nice clean finish. But then I walk into another house and they have every piece of furniture under the sun, and they have fancy curtains, they've got couches, they've got tables, they've got whatever the case may be. At that point, I'm probably not going to move all of their furniture out of the into the center of the room and bag it all off and trash bag and mask whatever floor I can find. I'm probably going to do it by hand. I mean, like I said, it's really going to come down to each and every job individually. No two jobs are the same ever, no matter what people say, because they say it a lot.
So speak to doors in particular. Are doors typically sprayed then?
Typically, yes. Now, I do a lot of doors by hand, and that's because they've already been previously painted before. Generally speaking, with doors specifically, I will actually ask the client if they want them to be done by spray, or if they want them done by hand. I will typically ask them ahead of time. I make the automatic assumption that doors will get sprayed, but there are a lot of homeowners that have either had the doors painted by hand prior to, or if it's a textured door, like a hollow core door that looks like wood but it's not really wood. Those we don't generally have to spray those because there's enough texture on the door already that we can roll that, and the texture of the fake wood will kind of alleviate any texture from the rollers anyway. But it's a question for the homeowners. It's really up to them whether or not they want a specific finish, or if the door is really old and spraying isn't going to be an added benefit, then again, it's just going to be kind of up to them. But more oftentimes than not, I prefer to spray them because it just gives them a cleaner, fresher finish.
Very good, very good. Will you refinish like kitchen cabinets? Is that in your portfolio
Absolutely.
of services?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, kitchen
Okay.
cabinets. Kitchen cabinets. It's a little more expensive than a lot of the other projects in people's homes generally because there's quite a bit more work that comes into play there. But there's no shortage of styles and colors and options for kitchen cabinets. So if the wife wants a new kitchen, have her give me a call because absolutely, I will definitely do some cabinets.
All right. Well, cool. Is there any other things you'd like to cover before we wrap this up? It's been great so far. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about?
Well, I mean, obviously, we talked a lot about the painting, and like I said, that is primarily the main focus of my company. We do a lot more painting than we do anything else. But I want to make sure people are aware is that that's not the only thing that we do offer. Like I said, we do have those few things that we don't offer, mostly because I just don't want to mess with them, and there's other people that have the insurance for the electrical, the plumbing, and so on. But it's something for my clients to know is that when we come into your house and you call me for paint, feel free to actually ask, hey, do you handle this too? Do you handle retexturing your ceilings? Do you do drywall work? Yeah, absolutely we do. We do drywall work all the time. We have a lot of clients that will ask us all these things, but they automatically assume that just because painting is the first thing in the name, that's the only thing we offer. No, we will build you walls. We will do some framing for you. We're a remodel business. We do renovations. We do make readies. We do turns. So property managers, they can give us a call too. We handle all of those things, and we're not just another company that you see on YouTube or DIYs. We're not. I kind of jokingly say this, but unfortunately in our industry it's kind of true. We're not the meth head painters we're not the meth head renovation company that is kind of unfortunately making a bad name for our industry because there's so many of them. We didn't get our skills from YouTube. We got our skills from 20 years worth of hard labor and learning this step by step on one job site to another job site to another job site. And so when I say, feel free to ask us, if we do something, go for it. Because we are more than happy to take on pretty much everything in your house. And almost, I think in 20 years, I've only had 3 callbacks. And it wasn't anything that I did. It was something that was unforeseen that caused damage to something that I did. So, there's no shortage of people in my industry. But if people really do want to have somebody that trained under masters, like true masters, not self-proclaimed masters, but true masters, if they want somebody that's going to be honest with them and tell them exactly how it is, and at the same time still remain integral to their roots, to their morals, that's what we do. I can't say we're always the cheapest. I mean, I'm trying to find ways to keep the cost down because of the economy, but we do so much more than most of the companies like mine. And it's the company. A homeowner will say, "Oh, well, I called this person because they handle this different thing, or they do flooring, or they do drywall," and I look at them and say, "Well, we handle that too." It is generally significantly cheaper for my homeowners if they call me for all the projects rather than calling me for one project and then calling me for another project. And so don't hesitate to ask. I'm not going to go through all the different things that we handle because the list would be miles long. But yeah, I mean, if there's anything that I would add, it would be give us a call for other stuff too.
Very good. What's the best way to get in contact with you? We'd love to give the contact information out. Or your company and your service. Well, is it best to call you? Is it best to go to your website? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
My phone number. My phone is my wife hates it, but my phone is always open. give me a call just about any time, and I will usually answer. Now, please be respectful of 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. I would like to sleep too. But my phone is always open because I realize that some people, they work during the day. And so, they may not necessarily get a chance to go to the computer and look up my Facebook page or something like that till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. But if I don't answer, please leave me a voicemail. I will get back to you just as quickly as I can. I'm always checking my voicemails. I'm not one of those companies that has a voicemail box that is currently full. Please try your call again later. I'm checking my voicemails constantly and emptying it so that I can make sure that there's room in case I can't get to a phone. You can also get a hold of me on Facebook. We have a Facebook business page. It's under the same name. My logo is all over the front and top of it. From there, you can also take a look at our current jobs that we're doing. I'm not super into social media. I'm still learning the ways of that. But we do have kind of like a progress report and updates. So I say, here's the before pictures. Get ready and stay tuned. Be watching for the after pictures. And when we get finished with those projects, I then go ahead and make another post with the after pictures. So you can take a look at our entire portfolio, or at least most of it. And then, some people, they want to leave a message on Facebook. I'm completely okay with that. I may not always see them, but I am technically able to take the messages on Facebook. So if that's what you want to do, go for it. I've had some of my greatest clients come from Facebook. We are also in several groups. We're in a Ozark, Nixa, and Welcome to Springfield group. So you can check us out there as well. You can check out our posts on those groups if you'd like. I'm not currently in any Branson ones, but I haven't quite figured out Branson's social media standing yet. So, but once I figure that out, I'll probably be joining Branson's as well.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, Matthew Sellers, thank you again for being on the podcast with us. We look forward to staying in touch with you and gaining you some new referrals from this podcast. All right.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome.